Hey everybody, thanks for joining our webinar today. We're talking about migrating from a legacy environment to a more modern approach, which is cloud native environments. And why should you go on this entire shift? Why approach it? What are the different methods to approach it? We're going to discuss all of that. But first, let's introduce our guests. Hey everyone, I'm Siddhan Khisti. I'm a product executive at Devtron, and I'm also an organizer for the Cloud Native Community Group for the city of Nasik. Prakash, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi guys. This is Prakash. I lead the DevOps team at Devtron. I'm also a maintainer at the Devtron open source project.
And we've also got Robert with us. Robert, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Robert, and I work at Soprasteria, based out of Norway. I am, I have a lot of various things going on. I'm a Microsoft MVP and CNCF ambassador. I am one of the co-chairs of Tag App Delivery. One of the chairs of the Platforms Working Group and co-founded that. So been involved with open source, cloud native, basically most of my career. And this is a particular topic that I find very interesting, and it's going to be fun. And thanks for inviting me.
Happy to have you with us. And yeah, the tag app delivery is how I met Robert in the first place. And I just reached out to him, and it was really amazing to see like folks are really involved with the entire modernization space. So we're going to be running an entire series of webinars. And to stay up to date with the webinars, please do scan this QR code and you can stay up to date with all of our future webinars as well. So before getting started, let's talk about tech actually acting as a business enabler. So even before hopping onto the entire conversation of modernizing, we need to establish that technology is actually just an enabler. So I saw this quote recently from Amazon. Jeff Bezos initially intended Amazon to be just a delivery system, right? So delivering goods to people's home. It just so happened that technology was the best way to achieve that end goal. So, Robert, what are your thoughts on looking at technology just as something which is enabling a business to reach their particular goals?
Well, I think that in many cases, especially now in the modern world, everything's built on software. Is the traditional world of the analog is kind of gone. You can't really do that in any business. So I think in general, tech is what kind of makes business work. And there are a lot of like old stereotypes or I guess misconceptions that tech and IT in general are a post on the budget, and you just have to make sure that they are within budget, and they're an expense basically. But I don't really see that as true anymore because, like I said, everything is software. And if you don't have software to sell, then you basically don't have anything to sell. So even if your main product might not be software, you still have to get that out to customers, and that is primarily done through software.
Love that take. Prakash, what are your thoughts on the matter?
So Robert rightly said that everything is software right now. So be it aviation, be it manufacturing, be it finance, software drives the core of every business aspect. So it's imperative to to achieve operational efficiency. Then you also have to keep on innovating, bring on implementing AI and stuff to streamline your supply chain. Even for cost optimization purposes. I mean, I've seen customers and I've seen logistic companies optimizing their paths so that they can deliver faster and quicker, right? Technology is an enabler of everything. Even if your product is not sort of a software, it enables everything. But if your product is software, it becomes very imperative to keep on enhancing the technologies that you are using. It will enable faster time for your features to be released to your customers, thus enabling a better customer satisfaction. Right? So it becomes the aspect and core of everything.
And
Love those.
just like a very little side note on that, while, like I said, like everything is software, but from a business perspective, people might not think of it as software. So if you ask, for instance, Airbnb, they're selling, a accommodation, experience. But the reality is that, it's through an app and through a platform that they're enabling people to rent their properties out. So, even though people say, our business is something and is not related to tech, it's most likely tech underneath that makes this possible at all. So,
True.
Love those takes. Love both of those takes. Thanks for your inputs, Robert and Prakash. And yeah, I love the fact that you mentioned like pretty much every single industry out there, whether it's aviations, logistics, all of them use tech in some way or the other. Like it, I think it would be pretty accurate to say that in today's day and age, not using any sort of tech, not using any software is just a recipe for any sort of a business to fail. Since we've established that tech is a really important factor, let's talk about what exactly are the risks of not updating your tech stacks. So it's already pretty clear, like many enterprises in today's day as well, they still use quite a few legacy technologies. And let's face it, they may not even be able to migrate off of it because the risk, the amount of effort it's going to take to migrate from there may just not be justified. But still, it can have certain risks for not coming up to date, especially since technology is evolving at a rapid pace. So, Robert, based on your experience in the entire industry, what do you think are the biggest risks of not updating tech stacks regularly?
well, in general, I think that not keeping up to date imposes a lot of various security risks, basically operational risk, and even like legacy systems in banks that are crucial to how banks work, that are written by COBOL. Even those systems are starting to get they're starting to migrate away from and finding new ways of making sure that these core functionalities of basically how the entire world runs is getting moved away from legacy programming language or legacy systems. um, it's at some level, again, there are certain systems that are so intertwined in our society that we it's hard to like move away from them. As long as you have systems around these things, it's usually okay to a certain extent. But if you don't start moving towards something new at some point, it will just be too difficult to do, or it's going to be even harder to do than it would have been if you started that process now. Because we have things like strangler patterns and all those kind of things where we can start taking bits and bits of systems and start moving them towards new things, and that is something that is very doable. So I don't think there's really no excuse not to start moving away from these things. But at the same time, people see it's more obvious to people the risks of moving and starting to mess around in these very, very core systems. But if you stay too long on them, at some point it's gonna be harder to move. And in general, it's a while everyone else is focusing on the newer things, you're gonna, not have the right people to help you. You're gonna have, you have to have routines to make sure everything's up to date, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that gets just like, that's increasingly more hard the further along we go.
Love those points. Like, if something's working, like it's fine to keep it as it is, but chances are that software in general, at some point or the other, it may run out of support, right? So that's one of the risks of being on legacy stacks. Just in general, your software may not be supported anymore. Prakash, I know that you've worked with a lot of enterprises. So what do you think? What are the major risks of not updating frequently?
And so stagnation is a problem everywhere. I mean, if you talk about software or you talk about the knowledge, right? So, in terms of software, it accumulates a lot of technical debts, which also result in increased costs in terms of operations as well as maintainability. Right, over time, static systems become outdated and they're harder to maintain. And legacy systems often require more cost to keep on running and keep on maintaining it, because in today's world, if you start searching for people who work on those legacy technologies, they may be very few. And to hire them, you will have to spend a lot of money to hire them, and then they won't be efficient enough when compared with the latest technologies and tech stack that other companies are using. Then you will keep on missing opportunities to modernize your application, in the sense that you will miss on opportunities wherein you may want to automate something and you are not able to do that because you rely on the legacy systems that may not even interact using API mechanism as well. And then finally, the outcome can be that there can be disaster effects on customers as well. They may see slower performances, and then finally, that may accumulate a lot of frustration in the customer's mindset as well, because they have to wait a lot when they are using your software or your application. That can have disastrous effect on your customer satisfaction scores as well.
Awesome, love those points, and that directly ties in with our next point of discussion, which is why exactly should a business even embrace the entire modernization journey? Now, Prakash, you already touched upon a lot of the important factors on why exactly a business should think about modernizing their entire tech stack, whether that's code, whether that's deployments, whether that's their entire infrastructure itself. So, my question now is, how would you actually convince a business's leadership team to embrace the modernization journey? We ourselves are tech heads, so we know exactly what's the risks of not modernizing, not moving to the latest stuff. Things are going to break. But many businesses, they may not have a leadership who are techies like us, right? So in that case, how do you think, Robert, is the best way to go and convince leadership to embrace the modernization journey?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that I usually talk about when I speak about moving away from legacy systems to newer ways of doing things that not necessarily always just is centralized around things like efficiency and just like the accessibility of new technology and all those kind of things that are true about modernizing. Because if you move to a more cloud-centric way of working, you will get access to a whole lot more services. There's more integrations, there's et cetera, et cetera. And we all know that. But one thing that I usually mention is, like you said, we are tech people. You try to get people to basically make you money, right? Someone needs to build the things that you're trying to sell. Um, would you rather be sure that people want to work for your business because there's only a limited subset of people that have these skills? Or do you want to, have an uphill battle trying to figure out how to get people? Uh, if you posted something and you start referencing like 15-year-old technology and like old ways of working and stuff like that, people aren't going to apply to your job, right? At all. And at that point, you would have to go to someone and basically pay them extra to, put in the effort to work with these legacy systems, and that's not good for business. So, it's the better angle is to try to make sure that you have something that is appealing to people, so people want to work there, and that's everything from stuff like pension and how much time you have off work and all those kind of things, but also things like tech stack. Because would I take a job where the job requirement said, or the a job description said, have to work on-prem with only Linux servers or things like that? I would go, why would I do that? I don't want to, I used to do stuff like that. I moved away from it because the entire industry has, or not entire industry, but we have ways of working now that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to jump into servers all the time and do everything manually. So why would I take that job? And that is a thing that people don't usually think about. It's like the people part of this, not only the efficiency and integration and the ease of getting services and stuff like that. It's also about people and catering to the people who actually will end up make stuff that makes you money.
Love that conversation. And yeah, love the fact that you tied the entire modernization journey into also from a hiring perspective. So yeah, it already is difficult enough to attract great talent. And yeah, moving to newer tech stacks, stuff that's more in trend. Like in today's world, we've got AI, which is all the hype around, right? So yeah, that totally makes sense that folks would be attracted to that. It would drive a business goal as well as attract more and more talent. So love all of those points. Prakash, would you have anything to add to this?
Yeah. So if I have to convince a leader of why they have to modernize their infrastructure or their applications, I think that I'm going to back off. Because if I have to tell them why you need modernization, uh, it's already a game that is defeated, right? So it has to come from inside, and it has to come from them that they need to modernize their infrastructure or modernize their applications to uh, because they only can analyze the impact that it can have, right? It has to come from inside. So it has a lot of benefits, such as if you talk about the customer centric benefits, it enables faster delivery of your features, better customer experiences and satisfaction, high availability of your applications, and better performance that drives customer retentions. And in terms of operational efficiencies as well, I mean, cloud native technologies enable better scaling capabilities. Most of the tools are now cloud native friendly. So if you need to implement a tool set, you can do that very easily, because most of the tools which are nowadays coming in are cloud native friendly, so cloud native technology friendly, right? And then if you got to have that competitive advantages via maybe open source technologies and AI technologies, IoT, you have to modernize your application. You can't be relying on uh, systems that are 50 years old, right? And they have to relate it to their revenue impact as well, because modernized systems can have direct impact on your revenues. You are able to integrate with multiple other suites via APIs. You are able to rapidly ship your software to the end customers, and then you are able to give them better experience whenever they want. And right, like Robert said, nobody wants to work on outdated technologies. Everyone wants to work on cutting edge technology. So you'll find people easily who can build your applications, build your software.
And I agree that the change has to come from within. And one of the main problems that I see at companies that really, doesn't really work is that people that are, responsible and have the mandate for the technology and engineering often are not engineers or technical people. And that is a thing that I feel very strongly about, that if you have, when you need to have someone that has a responsibility for those things, that person needs to come from that, uh, you know, domain. Because if not, then you get into conversations that for us as, technology people doesn't make sense, because why would this even be an issue? And as we previously mentioned, like it's all about the people working in the industry, and we are knowledge workers, and knowledge workers find want to move forward. We want to learn new things. That's why we work with knowledge. No one wants to be just stagnant and not learn anything, and it's a difficult job because you always have to, like, pay attention to all the new things and all that. But if you can't deal with that, then you probably quit IT and start working with something else. So the people that are left that are actually are seniors in IT, they thrive on new technology, and you need to cater to those people if you want to have those people work for you. It's it's pretty simple when you think about it.
Love the fact how you've related stagnation and that could happen with professional lives as well as the tech stack which we've got in the business as well. So really love that point about stagnation. Now my next slide is going to be a little daunting, so audiences, you've been warned. And the conversation which we're going to have now is how do you actually embark on the entire journey of modernization? So on the slide, you can see like there's a lot going on, right? From moving from legacy to the entire cloud native architecture. We're consider for today, in today's age, we're considering cloud native to be the peak of modern technology because that's where everything's going. Everything's moving on to cloud providers, whether that's AWS, Azure, or whichever cloud provider you choose. They've got multiple services, containers, Kubernetes, serverless, and there's a ton more stuff coming out. So for now, we're going to consider as cloud native to be what modernization is. So as you can see on the slides, there are a couple of different approaches. There's lift and shift, there's replatforming, building a completely new architecture, writing your software from scratch. There are many different ways. So let's get into each one of them, starting with lift and shift. Now, based on my understanding, lift and shift is simply picking up the application as it is and throwing it onto the cloud. Whether it's going to work well or not is a completely different question. So, Robert, maybe you'd like to get us started with the conversation around the lift and shift approach.
Uh, yeah, so to be fair, lift and shift is even worse than that. So we in the cloud native world focus a lot on applications. Everything that we do is in terms of applications. Kubernetes was built to deliver applications. It's not built to deliver something that delivers applications. Um, Back in the day, as if it was like 100 years ago, but like previously we had servers and infrastructure, and on that we put on various things. Some servers might have more than one thing on it. It was not really about the applications, it was about servers and infrastructure. Um, as soon as you start moving that to the cloud, uh, you basically, like I usually say, that then you miss the boat. If that is like your first idea of this is how we're going to get going and lift and shift, that is bad, because what you're taking is not only applications, you take all the legacy systems and everything, and how it's bind together, and then put that up. So you take the entire virtual machines, all the storage, you take everything and just move to the cloud. And at that point, you don't actually utilize anything that is in the cloud. So my from my point of view, lift and shift is probably the least the approach that I would avoid the most, basically. If there are everything's not black and white, so there's always like gray areas. Sometimes you have a case where lift and shift is kind of the only way to get there. There might be you have data centers that you rent, and in a month they cut off the power. At that point you don't have time to do anything. If you don't have time to do anything but lift and shift, yeah, you kind of have to do that, but you need to have a plan when you get there. But lift and shift is by far the worst way of implementing anything in the cloud, the way I see it.
Awesome. Those are really great insights into the entire lift and shift method. One thing that I'd like to add is there could be a partial lift and shift. So initially, just pick up the whole thing, dump it into cloud native, dump it into Kubernetes as a monolith itself. Once you're on Kubernetes, then you could work on slowly breaking down the services, introducing the decoupling nature, the 12-factor application methodology, and all of those different things. But yeah, really love the points which you've mentioned around lift and shift. It might be one of the worst methods, but it's still one of the ways that folks would go around the journey, right? Prakash,
It,
would love your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so I agree with Robert that the left and shift should be the last resort. But I also agree with Siddhant, uh, which means that sometimes you do not want to maintain parallel infrastructures. The reasons can be multiple. One of the reasons that Robert mentioned, that you have to just plug off the servers, and you have a deadline that you have to meet to, and beyond that you cannot do anything. So the last resort becomes the lift and shift. So even if you do not have a deadline, sometimes people do the left and shift just because they do not want to maintain the parallel infrastructure that are required, right? So in that way, we first left and shift the entire monolith to maybe a cloud native or cloud platform. And then what we can do is we can carve out the small APIs from within that particular monolith, and keep on converting it to microservices and host it on a cloud native technology such as Kubernetes, right? So it works both ways. So I also have like a big mixed feelings kind of for lift and shift operation, because yes, it is a dirty way, but yes, we have to sometimes make our hand dirty in order to get to that level.
I also want to say that, like, if you have to deal with lift and shift as a last resort, that means that you haven't been paying attention to IT. If that is something you need to do just because you don't have the time to do it any other way, that means you totally ignored IT and you haven't put the right resources on it. Um, if you already and if you start moving away from the servers and towards applications, so if you start looking at how you can take the code that you're running from these servers and start putting them into, even if it's temporarily, something that's better than lift and shift. That then you're already starting to think more cloud native, not cloud natively. Um, because again, what we're focusing on is making sure that applications are up and running, not that we have the servers up and running. The absolutely, worst case of lift and shift that I've, encountered was a company that said they wanted to do this, and they kind of refused to like acknowledge that this is not a good way, because if the other paths are something that takes a longer time, they just wanted to get out in the cloud because they heard that's what's cool, I guess. And it turns out they had applications running on these servers, but it was all containers running Docker on servers. So they already containerized everything, and they could basically just take those containers and put them somewhere else in the cloud, and they would have been done. But again, because of leadership not actually coming from engineering background and not understanding, and they kind of like push down this requirement that, yeah, this year we're gonna go cloud. Um, you know that's what happens when you don't have engineers in tech leadership roles. So, like I said, lift and shift is a really bad method of adopting the cloud. Anything else, like if you can do anything but lift and shift, that is good. Obviously, the best way of doing it is totally refactoring and even maybe even building new, depending on what you're trying to do. But you don't have to go all the way there. As long as you actually use the cloud for, for what the cloud is, then you're on your way to something that's better. And then obviously continuous improvements. That's what we're all about.
Love those points, Robert and Prakash both. So before I talk about the refactoring approach, which according to the conversations we're having seems like the best approach for moving over to more of a modern architecture, let's talk about first rewriting it from scratch. Now, like you said, like you mentioned, Robert, lift and shift is just a quick and dirty method of moving over to the modern technologies. So let's talk about building it new. Does it really make sense for investing resources into building the entire application from scratch? For example, you could be an organization as big as Amazon. For an organization running at that scale, building from new is probably going to take, I don't know, maybe an entire decade just to rewrite the entire product itself, bringing it up to that particular scale. So, when do you think the entire rewrite approach or just building the software back up from scratch should be taken? Prakash, maybe you'd like to go first.
Yeah, sure. So, for an organization of the scale of Amazon, it may not be the best approach, but for startups, it can be a better approach, which means that it's better to invest your time in writing your applications right from the scratch in effort to modernize it. Rather than refactoring it or lifting and shifting it to the cloud or the modern infrastructure. So it always has better outcomes when it is done in smaller chunks. For medium-sized organizations, I would recommend that they do a gradual shift, which means any sort of new microservices which are coming in should be created from scratch on the new technologies, while half of the bandwidth goes into modernizing the existing applications and bringing it to the new tech stack. So that's how the mid-level organizations can do. For the large level, I think they have to do a lot of refactoring in order to make their applications compatible to the cloud native ecosystem. And then they can think of maybe rewriting some part of it and taking it as a tech debt in each iteration and modernizing it iteration by iteration. So it's never going to be a monthly task, a month of the task. It is always going to be a longer duration. So you'll have to. It would be a epic, not a sprint.
Love that
Yeah,
point.
I agree on that. One thing I would add is that if you have a company of the size of Amazon and you have to rewrite your entire tech stack, then again, you have been, placing too much value in other things than tech, I think. There are companies that have to do like massive rewriting of the technology that they're using, and in some industries there are certain software that just you literally can't get rid of. There's still in many airplanes floppy disks that have the things on them to make a plane fly. I know that sounds scary, but it is actually true. That's just because, first of all, it works. Everything's offline. it doesn't need to be fast. All the systems are created for these things, and then they have modern systems on top as well that, for the things that need to be, more, faster and more efficient. And at some point, it just costs too much to move from, away from something that works until you get to the point where you don't need it anymore. But if you have a big company and basically you're and you haven't done like a continuous improvement cycle on these things, you will get to a point where you can't deliver on the promises that you're giving, and then you're going to be in trouble. But at that point, yes, you would have to start like first of all, I would like, I always say go for low hanging fruits. There are always something that is easy to modernize. And as soon as you start that journey of modernizing something, you can start getting in the culture aspects and get people up to speed with new things, and then you have the ball rolling, right? And then you can take harder and harder projects as you move along. And at some point, you can do the hardest and the biggest and most crucial things that are still on legacy stack. So there's a lot of companies that, again, rely on things that were built in the 70s and still use it to this day. But uh, but there's only certain aspects that are stuck there, usually because it's not really required, and it's it might be totally not safe, but it might be in as good as a position as it can be. And again, you at some point you start moving away. I keep on using banking as an example because it's one of the best examples. Uh, you know, code from the 70s and 80s is the reason why I can pay you money. Like literally, if you pay someone something anywhere in the world, stuff goes through COBOL code still that were written like 30, 40 years ago. Um, because it doesn't need to be fast. It is in all the system. It doesn't need to be fast because we wouldn't know a difference because it usually takes time anyway. It goes through countries, it goes through companies, etc. But there are new banks now that are popping up. There are digital only banks. There are banks that have all their tech stack written in Go, right? But they need to integrate with those other services that are run on COBOL and stuff like that. And usually the people responsible for that have abstracted that away through an API. So even though they are 100% modern, do everything in a modern way, integrate through APIs, at some point it might go through some legacy code still. At some point everything will be gone. But again, some aspects of this take a lot of time. But at least like chop it off, start with low hanging fruits, get that ball rolling, and then you'll get somewhere, hopefully.
Love those takes on the entire building from scratch approach. And the final approach, which Robert already mentioned, is probably the best approach to take, is the entire refactoring approach. So, Robert, maybe you'd like to start us off with what exactly is the refactoring approach and how should somebody go about it? Robert, you're on mute.
Sorry, I have a new keyboard, and if I hold in spacebar, I get a layer on the keyboard, so I have to double click to unmute, which I keep on forgetting. Yeah, so refactoring is all about like not only modernizing the code in itself, but also like how you deal with it. So, no matter what you have built your systems on, you don't only necessarily have to move away to newer versions of that programming language, but you also have to look at how you package it, how you deliver it, and how you run it. And again, this is the better way of doing things in the cloud because the cloud is built differently. Um, I usually talk about abstraction layers when I talk about these things, even though we moved away from physical hardware. Like I don't walk around and plug hard disks in servers anymore. Um, the servers are still there. There's still actual wires, but they abstracted away with virtual machines, and then they abstracted away with the public cloud offerings. And for instance, for me that use Azure a lot, many of the services that I use that are cloud native, that I have, there's no service that I can see. There's still virtual machines somewhere that are dealing with this, right? So, there's abstraction layers there. And to actually be, get the benefits of working at a higher abstraction level, you would have to use the services the way that are meant to be used. So not only move away maybe from legacy programming languages, move to something that's memory safe and all that and efficient, but at least like containerize. If you containerize your applications and services, it opens up a whole lot of flexibility when it comes to the cloud. Because if you have your code running in an application on your machine, you can basically run it anywhere else. So start doing that, start creating a more structured approach to dealing with infrastructure, like infrastructure as code. Start looking at things like platform engineering that's my primary thing that I talk about, because it's all about the entire picture of it all. And again, just moving your applications from servers to like a service somewhere, that's not necessarily it. So you have to look at the entire thing.
Love that answer, Robert. So, if you were to recommend somebody to, if you were to recommend a roadmap for somebody who's trying to modernize, I'm assuming the first step would be to move to containers first, and then adopt any sort of service which is on the cloud, whether that's virtual machines running on Amazon, so EC2 instances, or literally on any cloud. That would be the first step. From there, they can start slowly moving on to other things such as Kubernetes, as and when they need that level of power. Is that right?
Well, containerize your code is maybe the easiest way to start using modern technology. But I would highly recommend against using virtual machines basically at all. Not necessarily because they're bad. There's always a scenario where you should probably use a virtual machine. There's always the services that are built specifically for that, and so on and so forth. And like I said, if you use a cloud service from anyone, it's running on virtual machines, all right? The thing is like that is an abstraction layer that's kind of below you. You shouldn't, that's not where you get the benefits of the cloud. You need to use cloud native, platform as a service type tooling, not necessarily infrastructure as code. No, sorry, infrastructure as a service sets. So, but yeah, I tend to go with the route of, if you need to modernize your setup, start with looking at containerization, because it is probably the easiest thing to start with, which also is kind of like the method of transportation in the cloud native world. And as long as you have the right type of car, you can get anywhere.
Love those takes, Robert. So we've discussed these three different methods of modernization: left and shift, writing the entire thing from scratch, as well as refactoring. Now, with every single one of these methods, there is some challenges which are involved. Now, with every single method, it will probably have its own set of challenges, but there are a couple of challenges which I'm pretty sure are going to be omnipresent. For example, there's going to be knowledge gaps, right? Kubernetes has been around for 10 years and folks still struggle to get started with it, to operate it once things are in production. Similarly, with all the adjacent technologies to Kubernetes, and things are evolving at such a rapid pace. Today, we've got Kubernetes. Who knows, in the next 3 years, we could have whatever is the next stage of Kubernetes. So, there's also the entire challenge of continuously modernizing, right? So, Robert, I'm curious to hear what are your thoughts on the main challenges which are associated with modernizing infrastructure, modernizing applications and platforms in general.
I think it was Brendan Burns at Microsoft that said that like one either him or one of the other co-creators of Kubernetes said that like even the last line of code in Kubernetes will at some point be deleted. You know, we depend on progression. So everything that we do today, like everything is not going to stay the same, even though we still use tooling from the 70s. But besides that, like we are on a path, and we need to reinvent stuff and move along. So one of the things that I think are some of the challenges about modernization is just you could be in such a deep hole that the only way to deal with it is basically recreate stuff, which is a time-consuming and labor-intensive thing to do. You could use for legacy reasons, programming language that you probably wouldn't have used if you were to start from scratch now, but you cannot move away from it. Again, like the banking and COBOL scenario, where there are things that you literally can't move away from until you kind of just like get rid of the entire requirement at all. Um, so sometimes you get to the position where the code that you have, you can't really do anything without rewriting it. And then it gets kind of difficult. But even then, there's things like there's always a way around certain aspects of it. For instance, if you have written something that requires the entire .NET framework because you used to run it on Windows servers and you want to use Kubernetes, you can still set up containers that are more or less the entire Windows server, like a server core or something like that. And you could then run it on Kubernetes as long as you have Windows hosts. But at that point, you can get there, but there's a lot of things that you have to do to kind of just like keep the status quo until you can rewrite it. But basically everything is doable to some extent at least. But those are like typical challenges that I see that people have when it comes to code. But then there's also things like they don't have the updated knowledge. Um, you might be at a organization where the people responsible for some of these things don't want to modernize stuff. That is not a great position to be in, because you see the need to move to something new, but the people that have the job of being responsible for it are refusing because that's doesn't sound cool to them or something. That is not a great place to be in. And again, there's stuff like you need to have the time and the people. Those are usually the main issues with modernization. You need the time and the people. Yeah.
Love those takes, Robert. What about you, Prakash? What are the main challenges that you've seen that organizations face when they're trying to modernize, to move to Kubernetes and beyond?
Okay, so there are certain challenges which are specific to technologies and specific to business. But one common challenge that we have seen across all of them is resistance to this change. Uh, so you're asking someone to dockerize their application instead of just checking out their code on the live production servers, right? They are used to checking out their code, the latest code on their live production servers, and now suddenly you are asking them to go through the whole CI/CD pipeline, which means that they have to go through a lot of change, right? Because they are not accustomed to those kind of pipelines, right? They don't know what is Dockerization, how do you containerize, then how do you scan your images and everything for the vulnerabilities, and then you deploy the same container image into a staging environment, test out your stuff, and then promote the same image to the production environment. So they're not used to these kind of strategies to deploy. They are just they were just like accustomed to checking out their code in the production service, right? So it's a huge change for them. So and it's a cultural shift as well, which means that they'll have to adopt to modern practices of DevOps. Agile methodologies, maybe instead of the waterfall that they were accustomed to. So they'll have to integrate a lot of supporting tools as well, such as like you mentioned, Kubernetes for orchestrating those containers. Then so these are the common things that come up from multiple organizations. Apart from the technical incompatibilities across various infrastructure changes, then you'll have to maybe re-architect everything, and that may require a lot of system knowledge as well. And then planning and delivering these things with ensuring that there is no downtimes for your applications, right? It's hectic. So I would suggest that you adopt strategies wherein you have to do incremental modernizations, ensuring you disrupt minimum of your microservices, or ensure that there is no disruptions at all while you're doing this modernization within your organization, because there will always be people who are resistant to that particular phase wherein you're planning all these stuff. It may be because of multiple reasons. It may be because of knowledge gap as well. You're moving to certain technologies that they are not even aware of, right? So like you said that it has been 10 years of Kubernetes, but people still find it difficult to understand Kubernetes manifest and write Kubernetes manifest and deploy across their environments, right? So yeah, it has a lot of challenges, but incremental modernization is the way to go with.
And there's always the thing where back in like the early 2000s, everything looked very differently. The early 2000s is not really that long ago. So, you know, the people that got drawn to work in IT around that time would now kind of be senior persons that have responsibilities and so on and so forth. And the world that they were, what they joined are not how we do things anymore. Like I said, we have abstraction layers, but if you a proper nerd, for lack of a better term, wouldn't only be concerned about like the operating system, or the hardware, but they want the services on top, and then they want to learn how to program it and automate it. They want to deal with the entire thing, right? And that goes such against the way that we are, set up modern systems now. Because again, like even me that primarily works with Kubernetes and create platforms on Kubernetes, I don't deal with the servers that run Kubernetes. I don't even deal with like the database because I use a managed service from Azure that deals with all those things. The only focus area I have is to make Kubernetes work, right? And like, if you go back not that many years ago, that was not the case. And I am a nerd and I love every aspect of IT, from like hardcore networking and so on and so forth. But at some point, you kind of have to select which abstraction layer you want to work at, because it can't really do everything, because that does not scale. And the modern world needs scaling. And the new people that come in are more aware of that. They become developers. They become cloud engineers. They become platform engineers. They become very specific things within IT, and they're really happy about that. And if they want to challenge themselves and move to something else, they can do that, because that's just how it works in the modern world. So a lot of those people that I see that are kind of resisting the change are those people that, back in the day they came in, took a server down, like installed everything, did the patching and opened up the firewalls, and they did basically everything involved with hosting these things, and that's what was appealing to them. So I understand what people are going through when it comes to stuff like this, but at the same time, you can't really be left behind, right? So you either have to adopt, or you would have to change jobs, or retire in worst case scenario, or well, maybe not worst case scenario, maybe you deserve it, but you have to do something.
Moreover, I've seen that people tend to develop sentiments for the legacy systems because it's like they'll be missing it once they modernize their systems.
Yeah, my server called Gandalf. I want my Gandalf server back, stuff like that.
Right.
Love both of the points that you mentioned, Prakash and Robert. And yeah, we're almost approaching time. So I'm going to end it off with so much. We're running an entire series of webinars around the entire topic of modernization. And yeah, everything that we covered today was just a quick introduction towards everything that's involved in modernization. In the coming few weeks, we're going to have more live streams, more webinars, where we go in depth into every single thing that we have mentioned in this, whether that's the different ways to move to a modern system, what exactly is a modern system, the cloud native architectures, ways in which you can keep constantly modernizing your infrastructure, and other exciting topics. And just like Robert, we're going to get some really amazing experts on so that you can get actionable insights. So, to stay tuned for that, please do scan this QR code and stay up to date with our announcements for webinars. And yeah, also do follow Devtron on LinkedIn so you can stay up to date with all of those announcements. So, Robert, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing all of your knowledge. It was really great to have you here. And hopefully, we can have you on for more webinars in the future.